Hi guys, so happy Monday to everyone. Celebrated 8 months sober on Saturday, and then obviously made a video yesterday. But yeah, no, it's a big achievement, and I'm back playing five-a-side tonight. So looking forward to breaking into a sweat and getting a run around. Which is ironic because the video that I'm going to talk about today, one of my videos, and a nasty comment that was left on it. I say the exact same thing. I'm just after realizing that there, so it's obviously up there playing in my mind. I have a lot less hair in it as well, which is weird looking at it. But before that, Greg Belty asked me to give a shout out to Bob Dawson and RIP Bob. Sorry to hear. If anyone doesn't know Bob Dawson, I mean, I'm laughing. I know the man's died, and I'm not being cruel. It's because the song. You'll all know it when you see it, especially in Ireland. But obviously, Greg with the proud Irish roots, always given a good mention. It's the song "Don't Take Me Drugs Away." Hardly seen through yesterday. Cold turkey doesn't fit. Now it makes me feel like fucking shit. How the fuck am I supposed to see tomorrow? And if you know, you know. Check it out, by the way. Like, it's funny, but it's also well sang, you have to say. And with the Irish, the thick Dublin accent. I think he was from Kimmage when I looked him up anyway. And the RAP notices it was Kimmage. It'll be exactly 1 year in 3 days, so the 12th of March. So RAP to Bob. Sorry, Greg, I meant to do that sooner. I hope you're well, my friend. For anyone who doesn't know, I'll be going live again this Thursday at exactly 9 p.m. Just had to think how many fingers to hold up there for a second, which is mad. I'm also working on a big video, one that I really want to get right. So I've been working with a new group of friends, and I don't want to say too much about it because it's quite big, and I don't want to get them in trouble. They've been very forthcoming and helpful to me. So if they're watching, rest assured that the video will get made. I promise. But this is a video that I wanted to make for a while, like since the comment was left, because it was just fucking nasty, and it left a really bad taste in my mouth. And I thought, how the hell did you form that opinion off of what I've said? And I think it shows how triggered people are and how willing they are to just attack and pile in on you. So I want to show you it now anyway. I'll show you the video first. You can see how little hair I have in that one compared to now. I need a shave and a haircut. Though I do like having facial hair, I will say. So maybe a haircut. Don't know about the shave. What do you think? What I was asking in this, so just to give you a bit of background information, it got quite a lot of views. But I asked the question, would you feel comfortable letting a man look after your children? Why I decided to leave youth work. And, there's nothing malicious in what I'm asking here. It's would you feel comfortable, yay or nay? And if so, could you please give reasons? And I want to show you. So most people said yes. I also went through a Reddit forum, and if you said yes or no, I would say yes because I'm biased because I was a male youth worker. But my mate Callum, so glad you start putting your picture up. By the way, mate, it looks good. But we were talking about it here. Yeah, you didn't give an opinion on it really, but yeah, sure, who cares really? You left a comment and you were supporting me, so I appreciate it. And yeah, we were talking a little bit about it. He said, "Can see why you ended up finding it not worth the hassle. Hopefully, the future has something better." And I gave my whole story into the whole thing. So you're a servant to spoiled, entitled little brats. If you didn't know the context, I would understand how that looks quite harsh. Um, But anyone who's actually done the work, and that's the thing you'll always find, speak to someone who's actually done it and they will sympathize. Like I've worked in hospitality, so I sympathize with people in that sort of work, That's why I always put everything together on a tray and I bring it up to people, because I know the hassle of having to clean it up myself. It's very easy to sit back and judge someone else when you haven't actually experienced what they've done. And youth work, everybody said, "Jeez, I can't imagine." You know, there's a good channel, Dr. Joseph with Durin, both certified psychiatrist. If you want to check him out, I always talk about tapering off drugs. And then Bryn Lee. Oh, I really would have liked to have joined that, Bryn. Sorry, I would have loved to have joined your live. Don't know if you left a reminder, but Stu from Backcountry, Stu, you bastard. You set up another live stream, and I really wanted to be a part of that. And I only joined literally in the last second when you were wrapping it up. I joined as you were wrapping it up and giving your take on the Serenity Prayer, which was nice, very short and concise. So let me know next time, Stu. I love your Q&A so far. And Bryn, maybe you did let us know, in fairness. I would love to have been a part of that. If you two guys watch this channel, please join us on Thursday. Love to have you around for it if you're free. Hope yours went better than mine, the first one. I just did it on a whim. But anyway, hopefully, fingers crossed, it's better on Thursday. Another channel that I really like, and that's why it keeps popping up in my suggestions. But Elena Carroll, she's Kiwi and she's a female autistic, and I do like a lot of stuff that she talks about. I think it's quite good. But here we have Greg Belt. Greg is our top commenter, so much love for you, Greg. That's why I gave the shout out to Bob Dawson. I didn't know he died until you told me. I knew who he was, but I didn't know much about him, to be honest. But I'm glad that you mentioned it, and RIP again to Bob. But Greg says it here: discipline and manners make a good character. You are only trying to guide them onto the right path. Glad that you care enough to do so. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Yes, they do. Sorry, I'm after going too far now. So, absolutely, George Orwell in 1984. So he was taking a quote from the 1984 George Orwell novel, with Big Brother and everybody watching. So he said he wouldn't have a problem with it. So just go back to the question in case you forgot. Would you feel comfortable letting a man look after your children? Why I decided to leave youth work. And I can see an argument for and against, and that's as someone who did it. I'm not here to say you're wrong. And just because you don't agree with me, you're completely wrong. In fact, if you watch the video, you'll see that I clearly say you've given your reasons, and I respect them, even to people who say no. George Orwell's predictions seem to be fairly accurate nowadays, indeed, didn't they, Greg? Yeah, Animal Farm too. Yeah, I'd know Animal Farm better than 1984 because I had to study it in school. With the pigs, Napoleon, they take over the entire farm. Communism seems great in theory, but it's not in reality. Darren McGee, also another good channel, Northern Irish man. But anyway, yeah, me and Greg just having a bit of a personal conversation there, so I won't go into that. But you can see Greg says absolutely George Orwell 1984. We have a bit of a laugh about it, and he did talk about it here. Ballymena. Sorry, 1 second now. Responding to someone. Pardon me. Yeah, I was glad that I got Greg's heritage right anyway. I know you said someone in Antrim. So yeah, I got that right. Your ancestry, Galway and Antrim. A bit more as well. Discipline and manners makes good character. You're only trying to guide them on the right path. I have many thoughts on this video, by the way. With the rise of psychopaths and fake psychopaths and all this stuff, and I could go on forever about that. But it's something I really want to make a video on in the future because I feel like there's a real rise in people bullshitting and claiming they have it and claiming that they are dangerous and are not to be fucked with, and it's all a fear tactic, really. And then people are asking the questions: would the world be better if we were run by psychopaths or sociopaths? We already fucking are, and it's not. It's terrible, So they always say yes because it'd be more efficient. How can it be more efficient when everyone's only looking out for number one? It wouldn't be, and it isn't. We're seeing the evidence right before our eyes. So yeah, discipline and manners make a good character. You're only trying to guide them onto the right path. Glad you care enough to do so, and absolutely, like it was rewarding in certain ways. If you got if you got a child that really liked you and you knew that you made their life better, and you gave them a moment where they were happy and they felt good about it. That's a very rewarding feeling, you know. Just gonna let Alfie in because I can hear him barking, so I'll be back in a sec. Blonde seal, little prince. Ah, he loves his new toy, a Paul Costello teddy bear. The girl at the tail was laughing at me. Well, she wasn't laughing at me. I told her it was for our golden retriever, and she just said, "Well, that's a bit expensive to be getting him." And I was like, but he's a good boy. He deserves it." And she said, "Oh, that's so cute." And I was like, "I know." Yeah, I have a very soft heart, and it's dangerously enlarged. Joke. Well, blood pressure was high in this job, definitely. But I was saying it was actually very rewarding when you were dealing with the kid and you made their day, you made them feel a bit better. And a lot of them did like me, and a lot of them would talk to me and ask me questions. Like, so now I was like, whoa, okay, like say stuff that was inappropriate, and I'd be like, geez, where do you get this into your head? Obviously, you have to just be more mature and go, okay, tone it down. Let's not talk about that sort of thing. You know, you've also got to be smart about it because kids are a lot brighter than we think. They they know shit and they know when you're lying to them. So you've got to tell them something in a way that is like, I'm the adult, you're the kid. So don't speak to me that way or don't talk down to me. But at the same time, you also need to go, they're not stupid. They know when I'm lying to them. So be real with them. Like sometimes as well, like there was this one kid, and he was hilarious. So anything he said, he'd always make me laugh. And then like if you're laughing, you couldn't keep a straight face. Like we were going through the rules for what we were supposed to do. And he'd say, Daniel, you broke the rule. Rule number three clearly states. And I'd be like, you got me there. So you gotta have a laugh as well. Like I'm not a strict disciplinarian. I don't think I'd be able to. If anybody sees how I treat Alfie, I treat him like a lord. And I know he's a dog. Well, dogs are family, so but I have a very hard time disciplining him. Even when he's bitten my hands, and gave me a bloody nose. He didn't mean to though, so all is forgiven, of course. But I have a tough time discipline at all, like even giving out. So when I do, it's kind of like I don't want to be shouting and screaming at you, but have manners, have some fucking manners and respect. That's a given, you would think, but with a lot of kids, it wasn't, and mostly younger girls because they've been told that they're great, and they're the future, whereas young fellas, and I saw it, younger lads are always given out to and told, you shouldn't be doing that. You're the problem because we are biased to think that young lads are bad and misbehaved, and boisterous. Whereas from what I could see, they were just being playful. They were just exploring, because lads are more like, oh, what's this? And then something gets smashed. They're more foolish than anything else. Whereas I could see with young girls, they were more callous, they were more, you can't tell me what to do and you're not the boss of me. I'll come in the middle, you're not the boss of me now. Or talking to me like I was a servant, like staff. Like, go back into the kitchen, you. And I was like, don't talk to me like that. But you say anything, nothing is going to be done about it. I brought it up. I said I didn't appreciate that. Yeah, I tried being respectful about it because you have to be. You have to be diplomatic. When really what I wanted to do was go, are you fucking kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? You know, it was like, how dare you speak to me like that? But you can't shout too much emotion or you won't get anywhere, right? But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I said it to Greg here, and we are having a conversation, which is exactly what I was looking to have with the other person at the very top that I will mention in a second. So both my own mother and my brother said that they wouldn't be comfortable if they had kids and left them in the care of a man, which I thought was weird, given that I was doing that, and they said no, they wouldn't feel comfortable, which kind of surprised me. But at the same time, I was like, all right, fair enough. I can understand your point of view. I would do my due diligence regardless of gender and ensure that I am leaving my kids with the best person for the job. Exactly, like that's what you want. Yeah, it is like it is definitely odd. It's not as common. You're definitely more used to females being nurturing and caring. And that's a given, we're biased to that because that's how it works in the animal kingdom and so on and so forth. And yeah, with younger kids, I would think it was strange, all right, yeah, but I wouldn't. I'd be like, oh, there's a man that works here, but I would assume that whatever creche or youth group have done their due diligence. Do you know what I mean? Like, as much as any woman has to do their due diligence, so does the man. It's not like if you're a man, you just get to rock up and say, "Hey, I want to mind kids. Grand, here you go. Look after them now. Off you go for an hour with them." I've also, since I've started playing football again, been watching Zinedine Zidane highlights. The man was some player. I was watching the African Cup of Nations as well. He's in the stand with his shades on, looking really cool. His son Luca was playing in goal for Algeria. Pretty good keeper. It's just when I heard about his son, I was there thinking, oh, surely they're all going to be great midfielders like their dad. But I mean, it's very big boots to live up to, quite literally and metaphorically. Zidane was one in a lifetime. But here, like Greg says it as well, you can see the conversation we're having. That's what my channel is all about, is the conversation. Seeing what people think, getting your thoughts and ideas. And that's the point that I want to get across here. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Yay or nay? Why? Could you elaborate on that, please? So he sees it from both sides. Greg says, forget about politically correct nonsense. I agree completely. Females are just better at nurturing a child. Completely agree. It's typically the woman stays at home, minds the kids. Now, this is an outdated view, but I don't want to have the risk of sounding like Andrew Tate. Typically, the man goes off to work or, hunts a fucking wild boar, brings it back, and then we're getting very dark ages. But the woman stays and protects the children or minds the kids. It's always Mammy Bear. My brother played Mammy Bear in the school play, Goldilocks. It was fucking hilarious because he's in this costume and he's sweating his tits off in an apron. Very funny. When I saw the video of it, I was like, oh my God. Everyone thought it was hilarious. But here we go. So females are just better at nurturing a child. Yeah, they're more caring. There's no two ways about it. Towards their child, they tend to be the primary caregiver. That's why you usually see the children go with the mother in a divorce. It's very unusual that they go with the man, even if the mother is crazy and the father looks like the best option. Yeah, we have gotten to the point where we are so distrustful of everyone. So why doesn't childcare establishments just install cameras so mom or dad can watch on their phones while at work to make sure everything is okay? I mean, you get into the whole area of GDPR and violation of privacy, but if you can see what's going on and you've got video footage, I can't see anyone who's doing their job the correct way not agreeing to that. I certainly wouldn't have an issue with it because I've got nothing to hide. Do you know what I mean? So this idea is certainly, well, you talk about Big Brother, and now this is what we're getting into. We're getting into Big Brother, aren't we, Greg? We're filming everyone and watching everyone. The madness of it all is uninspiring, and I completely agree. It is awful how so many go about their job right daily and don't get acknowledged or appreciated. Then one bad individual pulls some vile stunt and fucks it up for everyone else. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like, if you've got nothing to hide and you're doing your job, you're not doing anything illegal, I'd find it very suspicious if you objected to something like this. I mean, then again, you could say, and I've mentioned it here, GDPR and people being watched in work. I always feel uncomfortable if someone's breathing down my neck, but I guess you just forget that the cameras were on you. Do you know what I mean? And that's another argument for it, because if cameras are on you and you kind of go about your day and you don't know they're there, or you forget that they're there, well, if you know they're there, you're not going to do the bad deeds you might have done if you thought you were going to get away with it. Whereas if there's no one there, bad people will do bad things, such as this guy. you know, a lot of bad people will do bad things unless they get caught. They don't care unless they get caught. They don't give a shit. You or I know that doing something or harming a child is wrong. Of course it's wrong. So that's why we don't do it, But someone with bad intentions is going to do it unless they have the fear of being caught, because then they're out in the open and they can't get away with it. I certainly wouldn't have an issue if I was being filmed at work, where I'm with vulnerable children. Of course not, because as you say, Greg, if the establishments have cameras, mom or dad can watch. They can see what's going on, so they're not wondering, oh, what happened here? Was this fella being a creep? Or because it's a very real fear, and as you say, it only takes one bad egg to cause a major incident. Unfortunately, bad people exist in the world, and we got to do what we got to do to protect them. If I was a parent, I'd certainly be all for this idea. Even when you're like, I know I'm comparing. I mean, Alfie is our baby, so I'm comparing him. I don't have kids, so like, I don't know what it's like to be a parent. I'll hold my hands up. I don't, and I imagine it's not easy, but it's also not easy being a care provider for children. And I do have experience in that. You know, 3/4 of a year, as a matter of fact. And I stuck with it probably longer than I should have done. But yeah, there are bad people for it. But if you get thoroughly vetted, then you've obviously had to do your due diligence. Over here, we call it Garda vetting. So you give your forms, you give proof that you're a good guy and you are who you say you are, proof of address. I gave it all over, I did all the proper training. And they can do an easy background check on you, so they can see if you've got a criminal record or not very easily. So if you lie about that, it doesn't take much for them to look it up and go, sorry, you're not working here. And I mean, in fairness, I wouldn't want someone with a criminal record working in childcare, you know. Like, one of the girls that I worked with, and this is quite a sick story, but one of her neighbours is a convicted paedophile. PDF file. I have to use all that terminology, but I'm not being monetized, so I can kind of say what I want. But because he served his time, and the sentence for having the sentence for having illicit material on this. So if you're viewing stuff on your phone, it's very light. It's exceptionally light. I think I heard someone only getting 2 years and a suspended sentence because it was just material. So they're only receiving material on a phone. And even when you actually physically harm a child, it's still very lenient. I don't know how long it is. I think some people I've heard of only getting 10 years, you know, with good behavior. But the girl I worked with, like, it's very, I certainly wouldn't be happy with it, because people found out about your man, the convicted PDF file, and they got the wrong address and they egged her house, or they put a brick through her window because they thought it was the guy next door's house. And she was like, "Oh, he's done his time. Like, he has to make people aware of who he is." But after that, it's he served his time. So once people are aware of what kind of a person he is, he served his time. So off he goes to live his life. Like, personally, I think what is the issue with chemically castrating anyone that does something like that? But it's a very real fear. I know it's a dark topic, but it's one that is very valid because, as I say, it only takes one bad egg. And sure, in Ireland, we've had like trusted establishments, aka the Catholic Church, carrying out absolutely obscene acts of violence against children and abuse. Even speaking to my dad, who he doesn't like talking about it, and I understand why. My uncle was brought over to a house with a Christian brother, and he used to have a paddle pool. And even saying it makes me feel disgusting. Like just a warped way. Come on over to my pool to cool down. That's what he said that your man used to say to them. You're like fucking hell, like it's. But I understand why parents have that fear, and in Ireland in particular, we were let down by someone who we placed a lot of trust in, which is why vetting is necessary. So I completely understand, and I would not object if cameras were placed in a place like that because I'm not doing anything wrong, and I was placed in a very tricky situation because there's supposed to be two care workers at all times with a child. And I brought this up, so I made them aware that I wasn't comfortable doing this. A young fella had to leave early. The parents gave the thumbs up, said, "Yeah, he's fine to go training." He was getting picked up by a family friend, and I noticed a couple of dodgy teenagers drinking and smoking in There's a little alleyway near where we worked. So I was sent from one building to the other, and that was okay. And I was like, "But I'm on my own with him. This is not good, But there was someone watching technically at all times, and we did have cameras out the front of the building, and there were staff on the reception area. But I wasn't given any real clear instruction, and I was kind of like, "This is a bit weird," And I just said to the young fella, "You go get changed. I'll wait for you in the cafeteria area, the kitchen area that we had, just where we ate our lunch. I'll wait over there, and you come back to me because I'm not standing outside while you get changed. That's fucking weird." I didn't say that to him. Obviously, I said, "Here, you do what you have to do, and I'll go back and wait for you in the kitchen." And he was like, "Yeah, no problem." I know what young fellas are like, though, and I know who I was. I was very forgetful. And especially when I was in a rush, I would have been like, "Oh, I forgot." And I ran off without saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm heading off now. But he did come into me, and I went out to the reception area with him, and then I let him go off on his own. And I started feeling like my instincts kicked in, and I was like, he's got to walk a fair, not a massive distance, but it's not a short walk. I've seen dodgy teenagers hanging around. What if someone comes by and tells them to hop in the car and they're not the family friend? What if? What if? Could I live with myself if something like that happened? And I thought, no. All my better instincts and judgment kicked in. I was like, no, I'm going to go with him, make sure he gets off safely. I spoke to the people who were collecting him. I said, "Oh, are you here for the young fella?" I won't give his name, but they were like, "Yep." I was like, "Are these the people? Are these the people?" And he just goes, "Yeah, yeah, they're my mom's friend." And I was like, "All right, cool. See you later, and we catch you next week." My intentions were purely good, and I was making sure that he got off safely. That's it. And I would have thought that the people I was working with would have been more caring in that sense. Was more. Now the parents gave the go ahead, so once he's off our property, he's no longer our concern, which I thought was very blasé and unempathetic, if I'm being perfectly honest. But hey yo, I also understand that you've got to protect yourself as a worker, but I also know that there are bad people out there. So my instinct was I I was there thinking I'm not sure if I'm supposed to go with them all the way or not. If I knew for a fact no, then I wouldn't have done it, probably. But I wasn't quite sure. And my instincts kicked in. I was like, I'd be very nervous that something could happen to him. So I'll just make sure that the people who are collecting him are the right people. And then once they say it, I'll give the thumbs up. And then I know he's got off safely. So that's what I did. And he was fine. So that was all good. Thank God. It was all out of a good place. But there were a few really stupid rules, and then also for our primary school group Christmas dinner, I had to be the big bad wolf and go over and tell kids from one of the groups to behave themselves, of course, and then that makes you public enemy number one. And basically, they look at you like you're the strict disciplinarian and you're the guy who doesn't want us having any fun. That's how kids see it, I know because I'm not long. Well, I was a kid once, so the person who's always giving out to you. You don't like them, and obviously you form a bit of a friction with them, where you're like, oh, let's piss him off now because he gets annoyed easily. It wasn't that I got annoyed easily; I was the only one going up and saying anything because the place that were putting the dinner on for us were being very good and letting us do it for free. So I thought, okay, the least we could do was make sure the place is in reasonable condition when we leave. They're firing food across the room, and everybody is just sitting there and doing nothing about it. So I have to go and deal with it. Now, when I spoke to my GP about this, she was like, "Well, if nobody else gives a shit, why do you?" And I was like, "That's a fair point." But after I actually went and dealt with the situation, I ended up having to be sat with the young fellas that I took on a Monday, which I didn't really mind. But I was like, "Do not sit me with that other group because I'm not sitting there with them saying all sorts and trying to cause trouble. Somebody else can sit with them." And I could see that nobody wanted to sit with them, that they all wanted to just sit beside each other and talk, which is what they did. And I had to sit on my own with that group. So they obviously trusted me enough. Maybe, they used me a little bit too much because I was the awkward one who had to sit with the kids and mind them while the rest of them just sat around talking to each other. But I liked the group of young fellas anyway that we were with, that we could chat about football and rugby and all. And that's the night that I got kicked as well for getting the lads' Sandy hat back off one of the girls. And I was raging, I was so fucking angry. It was like, what child kicks an adult, especially when they're not actually doing anything that bad. I'm taking something off them because it doesn't belong to them. So I took it off her. And then one of her pals comes in and kicks me in the shins. And I'm like, don't you ever do that again, you know? And I said it to her again, but she was laughing and joking, and nothing was done about it. The parents weren't spoken to. She came back and nothing happened. You've no power, really, as a worker. I say you want to have the patience of a saint, but a lot of people get into that work just because a lot of times they're a woman. Women are supposed to be caring, and to be honest, some of them couldn't give a shit. Some of them are very empathetic and do genuinely care about kids, but a lot of times it's just what you do. Lads go off and get a trade because that's what you do. Not their passion is in it. They're just doing it because the money's not bad and it's a manly job. Whereas women, childcare, that's seen as a more female-driven field of work. So that's why they do it. There are people I worked with who despised kids. They hated them. They were like, "Oh, finally, we'll have a week off and we'll be done." Now, I'm not saying it's not tiring, but there were a lot of kids where I did think these are a delight to deal with, and I did enjoy the feeling that I got from working with them. And it was rewarding in fairness. But I said that the Tuesday group that one of the girls was trying to sell me on, she kept saying, "I want you for this group, and I bet you'd love it." She kept telling me how much I'd love it. I kept telling me how I was a spare part for the other group that I was with on a Tuesday, and I was like, "All right, I don't know," you know. And I did get on well with her, but I didn't like that group. I just found them all entitled and really condescending for children. You know, when you met the parents, you could see why. But yeah, she did come to me now in fairness and said, "I'm wondering if you're okay. You're not. You're not like she didn't say it in a condescending way. She said you're not a qualified childcare worker. So if it's too much for you, just say it to me. Say, could you please deal with that, and I'll do it. I'm not the type to bring my problems onto other people. I never have been. I've always been the one to take it on the chin. But you know, I always like to deal with stuff because I don't feel good enough about myself if I don't deal with it. But anyway, we came to the conclusion that it was probably best if I found something else. They tried finding me another position there, but then I was being briefed on it. I started it for like 1 week, picking up fucking dead birds and dead rats. I was like, nah, fuck that, you know. And now I'm in a lovely area down by the beach. Once I finish my shift, I can go off for a swim. I'm cutting grass and greenskeeping, so that's fine. You know, that's handy enough. I can cycle to it. It's only 15 minutes away, 15 or 20 minutes, but much better. But anyway, as you can see, and as I've spoken about in probably too much detail, I like a discussion about this, and I did actually take the job seriously, and I did genuinely care about the kids. You know, I wanted to make sure that they were okay and safe. And I go back to the question I asked again: would you feel comfortable letting a man look after your children? Why I decided to leave youth work. You can see that conversation that me and Greg just had. Someone here says no. Alchemy hyphen W3R. They say no. And, you know, clearly someone who makes a video like this, don't you expect that they're going to want to know more? Like, how come? Could you elaborate? Now, maybe, like, I've liked the comment here. I've given it a heart and a thumbs up. And I was genuinely curious to know, okay, you said no. That's unusual. Could you elaborate on that? Now, the way I said it, I could have probably said it a bit better, and your reasons being, okay, so fair enough. I probably could have said it. I probably could have said it a bit better, and your reasons being, it could be taken out of context. It could be, and your reasons being, come on, tell me, why don't you want, you know? But you could have said, I'd rather not say, and I would have been like, that's absolutely fine, no problem. But anyway, maybe there's something I'm missing here. So let me know if I am. You know, my intentions have never been bad. So you can see a big, massive rant here. So let's have a look at it. Like, no, and your reasons being. You can see the big, long conversation that me and Greg have had about it. Right. Me and Callum had a conversation about it too. You know, he didn't really say either way, but he was like, I could understand why you wanted to leave it. We had a bit of a discussion about it. If someone said to me no, and I'd rather not say my reasons why, I'd be like, all right, fair enough. You know, I'd respect your wishes, but not with this response. So look at this. And why do you want access to my kids? When did I say that? I don't know you. I have no idea who you are. There's no information that I can gather from you. Your name isn't even a proper name. You know, it's a picture of a Barbie doll. Who the fuck are you? I don't know you. I'm not showing up outside your house going, give me your fucking, you know, hand over your children. No. So that's a weird angle to take. I'm trying, and it kind of baffled me at first when I read that first line. No, and your reasons being, why wouldn't you feel comfortable having a man in charge, right? So I want to just get a response here on the Reddit profile. I know lots of people were saying that because it's Reddit, it's going to be liberal, so people are going to say no, they don't have a problem, and yet people did. You know, someone says here ligamentary. I'm bracing myself to be attacked, but I also want to give you an honest answer. And I said in the video, I respect your honesty. Yeah. So it says, if you were credentialed and had references, all fine, but I'd vet you in your whole classroom operation, or sorry, your whole operation much more closely than I would a daycare run by a woman or a classroom led by a woman. I wouldn't have even considered it for my first or second child. By the third time, my eyes were open to a wider world than my religious small town upbringing, thankfully. But I'd still be initially uneasy. So beforehand, with the first and second child, absolutely no. But, you know, their mind has been broadened, thankfully. And if you watch this video, the first one, you'll clearly see that I say, look, I respect you for being honest. Again, I don't know who Ligamentary is. Don't know who anyone in that LinkedIn page is, and I don't know who you are, Alchemy W3R. I just simply wanted to know, could you please elaborate on that? I'm genuinely curious to know. I liked your comment. I was genuinely curious to know, why wouldn't you? You know, and even as I say it, I know it sounds a bit, well, why wouldn't you? You know, like tell me. I was casually saying, and your reasons being, if you didn't want to offer them up, that's fine. You know, you could just simply say, I'd rather not say. Okay, like I'm making a video for a discussion here, so no, I wouldn't. That's fine, but don't expect someone not to show a bit of curiosity. It's genuine, like it's genuine curiosity. Why wouldn't you? But anyway, we go into this. And why do you want access to my kids? I never said that, you know. I literally am talking about how I wanted to get out of childcare, why I decided to leave. I'm literally saying how I don't want to work with kids because of the experience I had. I'm not asking for access to your kids. I'm literally asking, would you be comfortable? If not, why? I probably should have said that, but I think you can kind of expect that I'd like to explore it further, you know. But hey ho, you decided to just go on the attack instantly. If you think kids are, quote, spoiled, entitled little brats, which I did say, yeah, followed by a tangent about how you don't like them, then why would you want to work with children? That is suspicious as fuck. So, like, I can see what you're kind of insinuating there, and I think it's quite disgusting to be perfectly honest. I've literally talked about why I left. If you're someone doing something suspicious, the last thing you want to do is draw attention to yourself about it. Just saying, you know, why the hell would I make a video talking about why I left? You know, like work that out in your brain. I've decided to leave. If you are some creep hanging around, it's the same reason why you wouldn't want cameras on you if you were working with kids and you were doing something unsavory. You don't want people to see you. Whereas I'm literally putting myself out there going, hello, this is why I don't like working with kids. Why on earth would I do that if my intentions were suspicious or, you know, if I had bad intentions, ill intentions, I should say. Um, that is suspicious as fuck. I've literally talked about how I just like, I mean, in case you didn't see it, because you obviously missed that part in the title, why I decided to leave youth work. So you obviously missed the title. And I did say some of the kids were spoiled, entitled little brats. I also spoke about the rewarding part of, you know, I spoke about how we had a group of teenagers as well. I spoke about how one of the teenage girls gave me a hug, and I was like, "Oh, isn't that nice?" And everybody was saying, but then I was kind of like, "Oh, does everyone think I'm a creep now or a weirdo?" And nobody did, you know. They literally like there was a group of girls there who liked me, who thought that I was friendly and nice, and there were a group of lads who had a laugh at me, and that did feel a reward, yes. But I hated the fact that I thought people were looking at me or thinking I was a weirdo or a creep. You know, I hated that feeling, even though there was no reason for it because I wasn't doing anything wrong. That's why I left. A whole host of reasons. And I didn't say all kids. I said there's a lot of kids that are like that. Not all. Spoke about the group of lads that I liked, and also the teenage kids that I worked with, that I liked them, for the most part. And I had a group where we literally, there was two autistic kids in the group, and we high-fived each other. And we were like, yay for autism. It was a weird moment, but it was also rewarding because it was like one of the girls was getting bullied. So the fact that I could make her day a little bit brighter, it was kind of like, well, isn't that nice? She was pleasant and quiet and, very easy prey for a bully. And I felt bad for her because I thought, yeah, we'd keep an eye out for her and make sure she doesn't get bullied in this group, because one of the girls who was bullying her actually was in the group. So that did feel rewarding that we could nip that in the bud as best we could. I also gave reasons for leaving Newport because of the bullying policies, because you had to physically see something going on. And even if you did, you could do very little about it, which I think is complete bullshit. If you see someone getting bullied, you should be able to pull the person aside and go, you don't do that here. No, that's not acceptable here. But you can't. And that really pissed me off because they cared. But of course, you decided to take one little part, he said, about a group that we had that were spoiled, entitled brats. And I don't take that back, because when someone says to me, go back into the kitchen, when you make food for them when they arrive, and they just take it and don't say thank you, don't say please or thank you at all, when they just have an attitude about them and an air. You ask them to pick something up, they go, I'm not touching that. No, even though it's their mess that they have left on the floor, because they've got no respect for anyone or anything. And then when a kid kicks you, I mean, I say that here, but like, how would you respond if a child kicks you after you're taking something off another one because they're stealing it? They're stealing something on another kid. You go to get it back off them, and then you get it back, and then another kid kicks you. Ask me how would you fucking respond to that? Because my blood was boiling, and my blood is boiling again, because how dare you make an accusation like that? Now, this really pissed me off, this comment, as you can probably tell. So then we get to it here. My quote. She's quoting me. I presume you're a she, but you can't know nowadays. You'd ask if I'd allow it. I gave you my answer. A resounding no. It's not resounding. It's just a no with a full stop. Like, okay, yeah, it was a no, but I think it's fair enough to ask. And could you elaborate on that? And if you said, I'd rather not say, fine, fair enough. Like, I'm not going to pry. I literally was curious. Sorry for showing curiosity, Jesus. Take the Lord's name in vain. I know. But anyway, I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying not to say it, and I've said it twice already, but I'm doing badly. I'm a bad Catholic. Where we say a resounding no. If you'd gone no, 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 that would have been more resounding, but or no, I wouldn't. But then you say, you asked if I'd allow it. I gave you my answer. Resounding no. That's where anyone with honest intentions would have respected parental boundaries and backed away gracefully. But you didn't, did you? Instead, you're being defensive, telling me to justify my answer. That is a huge red flag. How? Like, how is that? How's that being defensive? Your reasons being showing curiosity is being defensive, is it? You're the one who commented on my video, so I have a right to ask why. And if you don't want to give me that reason, I can't force you. Like, what can I do to force you to give me that? I don't know anything about you, nor do I want to by the sounds of it. Like, how is that a huge red flag? I can imagine a lot of people who made a video talking about this subject would want to know more if you just simply said no. Right? Now, if you said yes, would I have asked? I don't know because, I mean, if you said yes, I'd kind of be like, okay, I agree with you. So there's not much to discuss here, but it's the fact that you disagree with me, so I'm kind of more curious to know. And I've had plenty of debates with people that are respectful, where we agree to disagree. Why are you coming? My brother just finished his gym session, so he's coming in, barging in on me. Where was I? I've lost where I was. Yeah, because we differ on opinion, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying we differ. So I'd like to know more because your opinion is different to mine. Like then you go off on one here, and I'm kind of just like, what the hell? You say, seems you're trying to entrap, shame parents to gain access to their kids. How? Like you're trying to entrap or shame parents to gain access to their kids, and yet I've decided to leave youth work. How does that work exactly? If I was trying to entrap or shame parents, I would stay in the job, wouldn't I? Because how am I going to get access to your kids, as you put it so nicely? I had very brief dealings with parents, very brief, right? Um, Most of the parents I didn't even meet. Some I did, yeah. Um, Literally when they were leaving, they might ask how did they get on, or the girl that I mentioned who was being bullied. We would voice our concerns, and see if they were okay. That was it. And yes, occasionally we would try and promote the youth group to say it's the perfect place to send your kids after school, because it builds friendships and whatever. Youth groups are a great way of doing that, but we never entrapped anyone. I'm simply saying, why wouldn't you be okay with it if the person had the right credentials and was vetted? If they're vetted and they have the proper checks done on them, like the background checks, what is the issue? I don't see how you would have an issue with it. But like statistically speaking, yes, men are more likely to be abusers. That is also true. So I do understand that that's a statistic that doesn't look good for men, right? Like it's obviously a real and valid concern, but at the same time, how am I entrapping you? I don't know any information about you at all. You know more about me than I know about you. I've got nothing. I literally, even if I wanted to, I've got absolutely nothing to use, and I don't want it. So you've gone on a complete another rant about nothing here. And if I act like I'm annoyed, it's because I am. Because how dare you accuse me of doing something like that? That's all I need to see to know you shouldn't be anywhere near children. Seems you're trying to entrap, shame parents to gain access to their kids. If you actually bothered to watch the video, you'd see that I respect someone who disagrees with me. The person there, ligamentary, who says that they wouldn't feel comfortable. There's some people who say that they wouldn't feel comfortable or that they would allow it, but they would do extra background checks. And look, if you want to do that and that makes you comfortable, it gives you peace of mind, fair enough. At the end of the day, you're a parent putting your child in the care of somebody. I can completely understand why you would want to know the child is safe, but how on earth am I entrapping anyone? Ridiculous. I barely had any dealings with the parents. The only dealings I really had was to ask if a girl was okay because she was getting bullied, or telling people when certain events were on, so that the parents needed to bring signed forms to say that they were okay with us bringing their kids on a trip. And if we didn't get their permission, the child didn't go. And we weren't holding a fucking gun or a knife to their throat and saying, "Oh yeah, say it or we'll," you know. If the parent had an issue with it, we would respect their wishes. You know, if the parent wanted to take their kid out of the group, we respected their wishes. We always did everything by the book in that sense. You know, there were certain things, as I say, that I didn't like, you know, in particular, that I'm not allowed to make sure a child is safe because it's beyond their boundaries, but I'm allowed to go off on my own in an awkward and compromising position, you know, where the rules aren't being followed. Two workers aren't with the child at all times. I voiced that concern. I said this shouldn't be the case. And the response I got wasn't very good, but I was just happy that the young fellow was safe. That's all I cared about. And he was in the end, thank God. But I just thought that I was put in a very tricky position there, you know. So anyway, we get on to the end of this and we'll get through it because I'm fucking triggered. Seems you're trying to entrap, shame parents to gain access to their kids. That's all I need to see to know you shouldn't be anywhere near children. Nobody sincere would broach the question this manipulatively. How's that manipulative? Your reasons being you didn't have to comment on my video. You didn't even have to respond to that at all. You could have literally just left it at that, you know, and I would have been none the wiser. Would have been like, oh, okay. So they just came in to say no and then left the conversation. Fair enough. That's it. But no, you didn't do that. You decided to go one step further. Anyone sincere would be on board with leaving the protection of vulnerable children to women, not trying to subvert and infiltrate vulnerable safe spaces. Like, what the fuck? Anyone sincere would be on board with leaving the protection of vulnerable children to women, not trying to subvert and infiltrate vulnerable safe spaces. What are you talking about? Like, honestly, like, it's not my passion to work with kids. In fact, when this position came up with the support worker who suggested it to me, I was like, no, not really for me. I wasn't sold on the idea. But they told me I'd be great at it. You know, I went for an interview. I went and met with the people who worked there, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we think you'd be great." And I was like, "All right." Didn't really want to work there. It wasn't my first choice, but I thought, oh, look, well, maybe it'll be rewarding. And in case you're wondering as well, I also coach schoolboys with rugby. And I coach from ages 12 up to 18, and we get on really well. I haven't been able to make it as often, and the lads have asked for me. The coaches that I coach with were saying that they miss me and they want me to come back, and I finally can. You know, and I'm delighted to hear that. So I've been in positions of trust with kids a lot, and I've never done anything to abuse that trust, as you insinuate here. In fact, quite the opposite. And if you just want to know, just for your record, just so you can keep that and shove that up your arse, because you're talking absolute shite. I have done Garda vetting, which is the Irish equivalent to the background checks to make sure you're not a jailbird, you know, that you're not someone with a criminal record and untrustworthy. I've done that 4 times. I've done it twice when I was working in university, giving tours because you're working with people who are, some of them are under the age of 18, they're 17, they're going into college. So you have to do Garda vetting. It's a pain in the arse to do, yeah. It's long and tedious, but it certainly is thorough. And if there's anything dodgy about you, they will find it. So I've done that twice. I will just repeat myself just for your benefit. For doing those tours, I had to do it once when I was coaching, you know, where I had to give proof of address, ID, background check, a thorough background check. They wouldn't let me coach until I was done doing that, because you're working with kids, you know, in the in the school where I coach rugby. Then what I also have to do is I also have to do the Garda vetting for a place that I'm at that I was just recently at. So with the youth club here in Gorey, I had to do background checks again for that. I had to do proof of address, right? Garda vetting to make sure you've no criminal record, your previous employment, have you worked with kids before? All this they ask you. So 4 times, I think something would have been turned up if I was a dodgy fucker like you insinuate I am. So shame on you for what you've said there. I feel like it's quite disgusting. And I've been meaning to respond to it for a while, but yeah, I'm absolutely responding to that, and I'm making a video on it because I think it's disgusting. So you can clearly see that other parents have given their answers and explained why. They gave very honest and respectable answers, and even I don't agree with them, but I can respect their opinions as parents. All I'm asking is if you could elaborate, because anyone who has done their due diligence, like I have, as I've just said, so nice try, but I would never do anything inappropriate with the kid, and I think it's quite disgusting of you to insinuate that I would, to be completely honest. I never disrespected your opinion. I'm simply asking what your reasons were because I am genuinely interested, which I was. I was genuinely like, oh, that's interesting. Please let me know more because I was wondering why. You know what I mean? But you chose to go on the attack, not me. If you must know, I got this job through a government scheme. I didn't want to work with kids, but I was told how badly they wanted men in youth work. So they were crying out. And if you hear it, they are crying out for men in youth work. They really want men to work in youth work because it's all women. So you say you should leave it up to women. Anyone sincere would be on board with leaving the protection of vulnerable children to women, not trying to subvert and infiltrate vulnerable spaces, safe spaces. Like they were literally begging me to go and do it because they were like, we only have women here. We need more men, especially with the young fellas, because I was able to bring something different to the role. You know, the fact that I was into football, could play FIFA with them. They loved the fact that I could play FIFA on the PS5 with them. You telling me that a 50-year-old one, like an older woman, is going to be into FIFA? I mean, if she is, fair play to her, but I don't see it. That's why they wanted me because there's a lot of young fellas and they're very energetic and boisterous. And so they like to have someone there who can deal with that, which I could. I actually was very good at dealing with it. What I didn't like was the snotty nosed young ones that were, basically telling me, oh, I'm not doing that, or go back into the kitchen, or speaking down to me like they were the adult and I was the child, which I thought, we're not going to do anything about this. But nothing was done about it. So, not even a word to the parents or nothing. I didn't want to do this, as I say, but I didn't want to work with kids, but I was told how badly they wanted men in youth work. So, contrary to what you're saying, or contrary, I never know how to say that properly. I'll say contrary because my mum says you're a contrary ornament. But on the contrary to what you're saying, they actually are crying out for men in youth work, and they said that I'd be great for the role. So I tried it out. I gave it a go. Because despite having an honours degree in DNA and forensic analysis and pharmaceutical science, I, like many others, I should have probably put a comma there. Oops. I, like many others, cannot find work, so took what I could get. So I wasn't sitting on my arse doing nothing. 2 exclamation marks for this one. I left on my own decision, and many of my co-workers tried to convince me to stay, which they did. And I've got proof of that on my text messages. They told me to stay. They begged me to stay. They actually got me another role in the place. I mean, I was picking up dead animals in a lane, but the boss and the one who ran the whole place, she was trying to convince me to stay and telling me how good I was and hoping that I didn't fall out with anyone. I was like, no, no, not at all. It's stressful. Like your blood pressure goes through the roof. I'm autistic, so my sensory system gets overloaded easily. The screaming, the noise, and just the poor treatment, the lack of proper rules and boundaries. That's why. I did leave on my own decision. Nothing malicious like what you're saying. It's a nice one, but nice try, but it's not going to work. Said they liked me and didn't want to lose me. So nice try, but no. You have made assumptions about me that are utterly disgusting. You answered my post, which you did. I didn't put a gun to your head. You were the one who responded to my post. You answered my post, so I was interested to hear your experience. That is all. You could have simply said, I'd rather not share my reasons, and I would have respected that. Sorry for asking. Yeah, fucking, I'm sorry I asked. Like, all I said was, and your reasons being. I'm not being aggressive. I'm simply asking, do you have any more reasons? Whether you're a bot or not, I don't know. Bot or not, that should be the name of a game show if it. And as I've said here, I don't want access to your kids. I don't. Like, where are you getting that from? I've no idea. As I've said, I don't fucking know you. I don't know who you are, where you even are from. I don't know where you live. So, how on earth am I going to get access to you or your kids? You know, you make me sound like I'm the big bad wolf coming over to throw your kids in a sack and take them off to the North Pole or something like that. Like I'm the boogeyman. All because I said, and your reasons being. That's literally it. How on earth did you get that? Like, if you'd responded no and I'd said, oh, you're disgusting, what a man can't do the same job as a woman, the way women say it, like, oh, a woman can't do a job as well as a man can. Like, imagine that for a second if the roles were reversed. And if it was a male dominated area and the woman was told that she wasn't allowed to do it, there'd be fucking uproar. And there would, because a woman can do a job just as well as a man can. And I'm not saying they can't, but there's a lot of very entitled people who say that. It's the same thing here. If a man is good enough for the job, then let him do it. Same with a male teacher, A lot of teachers now are actually female, a lot more. A majority of them are female. Male teachers are on the low, they're on the decrease, which is why a lot of young men are feeling lost. So actually having a youth worker that is a male is a good thing. And I did get rewards from it. But like I've said here, where on earth do you get the idea that I want access to your kids? I left youth work, where I had access to kids, like where I'm working with kids. Do you know what I mean? I even feel weird saying that, like that's the way you've said it gives it a really bad connotation, but you do have access to children when you're working with them. So if anyone wants to say that's a Freudian slip or whatever, well, no, because you do work with them, so you have to have access to them. You know what I mean? Like, how else are you going to work with them? I'm merely talking about men working in childcare and why the stigma exists, because there is a stigma around it, 100%, which is why a lot of men don't get into it. The men that want to work in the area don't get into it. Also, from my personal experience, why it could be harder for a man to work in that environment. I'm not calling to your home and demanding you hand over your kids. Yeah, like where you get this idea that I want access immediately to your kids when I don't even know your fucking first name. You've reframed that completely. If someone works in childcare or youth work, then you have agreed to hand over your kids to a complete stranger, whether they be a man or a woman. And that's the thing, like you have when you start off like in any creche or youth care environment or even a school, let's say, you are handing your kids over to the care of somebody else. You don't know that person. And that's what I'm getting at here. You don't know any of them. Like, let's look at the whole case with your one Ghislaine Maxwell for a second. How many vulnerable young women she handed over to a vicious predator in Jeffrey Epstein, which I want to make a video on definitely. But I mean, let's bring it up because women are just as capable of being abusers and abductors as men are. So that's why the stereotype needs to be gotten rid of. Because there's definitely stigma around it 100%. So if someone works in childcare or youth work, then you have agreed to hand over your kids to a complete stranger, whether they be a man or a woman. You don't know that person. You are placing a lot of trust in them, regardless of gender, and hoping that they've been thoroughly vetted, thoroughly, thoroughly vetted. Got to take a sip of water from a parched throat, which I have, and I think I've made that quite clear. Um, and if anyone ever wants to check that, they can. They can do a background check on them. I'm not sending you documents because I don't even know you. Whether you want access to my documents or not, keep your hands off my documents, sister. I left because you can't even tell a kid off nowadays, and some parents allow their kids to behave terribly. Or do you think that it's perfectly acceptable for a child to kick an adult? You probably fucking do. Like, yeah, I mean, there's a number of reasons why I left. One, blood pressure, and my blood pressure was literally in a dangerous spot, right? So that is a genuine reason. Health concerns. Two, rules not being followed, not clear guidelines. And I've read my SOPs in the workplace to know that two workers were supposed to be on with any kid, any child at any given time. That wasn't being followed. And I felt like I was going to get people in trouble by saying that. But I'm not naming anyone's name. I'm just saying rules were not being followed like they should have been. Like before, when we had a power outage in the place I was working in, I looked for the other worker and I couldn't find her anywhere. That's a rule violation. I know it seems small, but it was a rule violation. I was looking for her because I was like, where the fuck is she gone now? You know, but rules were not being followed. So, blood pressure, health, rules not being followed, um, stress. Also, just feeling like there's nothing you can do. Like, there isn't. You haven't got a leg to stand on. It's all pointless screaming and shouting. It was rewarding at times, yeah, but ultimately it wasn't for me. So I agreed to leave, which again, I will highlight for you because you clearly missed it. Why I decided to leave youth work. I mean, pretty bad move for someone who's a creep, isn't it, to leave youth work? Your response, like some of them were entitled brats, yeah, not all. I didn't say all, but you've kind of insinuated that it was all. And if you watch the video properly, you'll see that I clearly say that some of them were good kids. A lot of them were good kids, and I enjoyed working with them. But of course, that doesn't suit your narrative, so you don't want to even look at that or entertain the idea that maybe I was just curious to know more about your answer. I could have probably said it better. I could have probably said, "Could you please elaborate?" Though that sounds quite snippy as well. I think when I'm saying it out loud, well, you care to elaborate? I think that does sound kind of snippy as well. So once I saw your comment, I was like, "Oh, and your reasons being." Now, had I said it like that, that's the problem with text. But you've just gone off on one for no reason. Anyone who needs to know can find my guard of vet. They can find that I am thoroughly vetted, that I have no criminal record, and that I'm a good human being. You know, there are no black marks against my name. I've had to do it 4 times, and it's quite intensive. It's a pain in the arse because it takes a while. There's a few different documents you have to go through. And if there is anything there, they will find it. If you're lying to them, they will find out about it. So, like, there's different occasions where I've had to do it. So, you see here how someone says no, but they give reasons. That's all I was asking. It's quite disgusting that you've said I'm suspicious as fuck, as if I have some dodgy intentions when I don't. Like, and as I said again, I don't know you. Like, I've had a conversation in the group with 2 other people because that's why I make my channel. to talk to people, to have a discussion. If someone doesn't agree with me, that doesn't mean they're wrong. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong for saying no. I'm saying you're wrong for the disgusting way you've attacked me and said that I'm suspicious and that I'm manipulating parents. I'm not manipulating anyone, you know. And it didn't even matter. I had no say like who came to group and who didn't. That was completely down to the parents. If the parents didn't want to send their kids, they didn't send their kids. I had absolutely no say in that matter whatsoever. I had no power. So, I mean, you're thinking quite highly of me in that regard. I had no say, right? You know, it didn't matter what I thought or what I wanted. I would literally come into work and whoever showed up, showed up. If more kids showed up than less, then that's fine. We deal with who we have and we do our jobs. You know, if people don't want to come, they don't have to come. That's fine. I wasn't going up to parents with a fucking gun or a machete and going, if you don't send your kid to youth club, I'll cut your head off and shit like that. Like, even if I wanted to manipulate parents into doing that, how could I? And I'd be told pretty quick to get the fuck out and leave. You know, as it turned out, my heart wasn't in it. It wasn't suitable for me. So I decided to leave. That's it. Nothing dodgy, nothing creepy. I actually asked to swap a Tuesday group that I had for a different group because I got on better. And you could see me, like that picture that I put up. I'll actually show you. Um, you know, this is really someone who thinks that I'm a creep. This is Yulia that I worked with in our integration group. It was our mixed group of Irish and Ukrainian. It was mostly Irish and Ukrainian um, kids. And then we didn't really get an awful lot of other kids. We had one Italian Spanish kid and then a South African kid as well. She's clearly happy enough to be seen with me. You know, she obviously doesn't think I'm a complete weirdo. I worked with her and we got on very well. We took the integration group a few times and I was high fiving and fist pumping the Ukrainian and Irish kids, and we were playing a game of laser tag, and we even went to a day out, you know, and the day swimming, and it was fun. You know, we took them to the cafe afterwards. We had a laugh and a chat with them, and she obviously doesn't think that I. You probably think that I'm entrapping her and making her take a picture of us giving the thumbs up and the peace sign. We got on very well, you know. And if she thought I was a creep and a weirdo, I'm a freak, I'm a weirdo. Why would she be so eager to come over, say hello to me, and then take a picture with me? You know, because I know that if someone I was working with in youth work was a creep, a weirdo, I wouldn't want anything to do with them. If I saw them, I would avoid them. Only thing I'd be saying to them is you're a fucking disgusting pervert, you know. And clearly, she thinks that I'm a disgusting pervert, right? You know, because she's obviously doing her best to get the fuck away from me. You'd probably argue that I went up to her and forced her to take a picture, which I didn't. We actually got on very well. And that was another group that was quite rewarding because you're dealing with refugee kids who are just children. So it was actually very rewarding to see them. They came up to me. My brother was asking, "Oh, who were they?" And I was like, "Oh, they're a group of kids from our youth group, our integration group." They were saying hello to me. One of them came up and poked me on the shoulder. Was like, "Oh, hello, how are you? Happy Easter." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, nice to meet you." I won't give the names, but they were saying hello, and I said, "Oh, happy Easter, lads. Hope you are all doing well." This is after I left, and they were like, "Oh, how come you left? You know, why'd you leave?" And I was like, "Oh, I just found a different job." And they were like, "Oh, okay." They missed me, so I just wanted to talk about that because I thought that was disgusting what you said there. your behaviour is suspicious as fuck that I'm manipulating parents when I have never done anything like that. Not that I could, even if I wanted to. So even if the motive was there, I had very few interactions with parents. So I couldn't. There was no way. I had no power whatsoever. I was just there to do my work, make sure the kids were safe, and sometimes I went even above and beyond to do that, which nearly got me in trouble because they didn't give out to me because I didn't break any serious rules and I was doing it for the benefit of the child. And they knew that. They knew that I was doing it because I was worried, not because I was some kind of creep. Because I was genuinely concerned that this lad could get beaten up in the fucking alley by dodgy teenagers, or someone could show up in a car and God knows what could happen. So yeah, that just really bothered me, and I tried making a video and found myself getting quite overwhelmed because I thought it was quite disgusting. And I was thinking if I just leave it or delete the video, but I've got nothing to hide. You're the one being disgusting, not me. And shame on you for saying that. And no wonder there's a stigma around it. That's all I'll say. I'm gonna wrap it up there, guys. Anyway, and have five-a-side footy now in a second. So that actually answers a lot more questions. Why men don't get involved in youth work. Even let's go back to that for a second because the comment at the end was just really disgusting. It's basically just leave it to women. Anyone who wants to get or infiltrate spaces. What are we fucking the CIA infiltrate spaces? She makes me sound like I think she's giving me too much credit here. Actually, makes me sound like a Mossad agent or infiltrate spaces. Like basically just leave it to women because any man that wants to get involved in it is a weirdo. Might be reading too much into this, but I certainly think she was reading into what I was saying. Again, I'm just presuming it was a she, but that part at the end, I didn't even read that properly the last time. Anyone sincere would be on board leaving the protection of vulnerable children to women, not trying to subvert and infiltrate vulnerable safe spaces. Right there. So it's basically any man. Probably reading too much into it, but you read too much into what I said, so I'm going to do the same thing to you. By the sounds of it here, what you're saying is any man that ever wants to get involved in childcare is a creep. That sounds like what you're saying to me. And you have proven my point. This is exactly why men don't want to get involved in work like this because of people like you. And you can see clearly that someone else feels a bit concerned and they would vet someone more thoroughly, yes, which they say here. But they would still allow it if you were credentialed and had references, all fine. I'll go back to it just one more time. Anyone sincere would be on board with leaving the protection of vulnerable children to women, not trying to subvert and infiltrate. Like, do you think I'm MI5, MI6, or CIA infiltrate? Like, that thought never crossed my mind. I was asked, would you consider working in that area? I was like, I don't know. They were like, go on. We need more men in youth work. It's really lacking men, and I think you'd be great in it. And I was like, we'll give it a shot. Because that's one thing that I'm good at is giving things a try. I gave this a try, wasn't for me, and this is why. That's what I'm explaining. I'm not trying to infiltrate safe spaces, as you say. Jesus. I'm not saying there aren't people that are like that, but a woman could easily infiltrate a safe space. In fact, I'd say she'd be better at doing it. A woman would probably have better luck infiltrating one of these safe spaces because she's a woman. I know as a man, I'm biased. I would be more suspicious of a man than a woman, especially in an area like that. But if you were thoroughly vetted, I wouldn't start going, oh, I don't want him looking after my child. But you seem like the type that would. I'll leave it there anyway. Just really wanted to respond to that. That really annoyed and upset me. How dare you say something like that about someone? Like, that's fucking sick. That really is. And you haven't called me a PDF file outright, but you've insinuated it. You've said that my behaviour is suspicious, which I don't think it is. I actually think it was quite mature. I realised it wasn't for me, that rules weren't being followed. So who wants rules to be followed when they're trying to break them? Ask yourself that. I was annoyed that rules weren't being followed and there weren't two workers, because that was the rule, and being autistic, rules make sense to me. And if a rule is not being followed, I have a harder time getting on board with that. I'm more rules based. I like rules because if the rules are being followed, and I've talked about that in countless videos, and if you want to check them out, not that you will, but if you ever did, go ahead and check out my channel where I talk about jobs that I've had and how it actually distresses me when rules are not being followed. Someone who has bad intentions does not want to follow the rules. They want to break them in the worst possible way. It's not like I have a childhood dream of working with children. That's never been a vocation of mine. It's never been something I've been particularly interested in. I enjoy rugby coaching. I prefer working with lads, teenage lads, because I think I can talk to them in a more mature manner, in the way that, like, I can hold them more accountable. Do you know what I mean? I'm saying, like, I know I have to think about how I phrase things sometimes, but I don't mean that. When I say in a mature manner, you can talk to them like an adult, because they are an adult essentially. I prefer coaching the senior team, so you're dealing more with 17 and 18-year-olds, who are less vulnerable. I preferred working with people who are definitely less vulnerable, because they're bigger and stronger. So I even hate saying it like this, because I've never had ill intentions, but I coach and I really enjoyed it. I actually didn't like working with the junior team. And then I worked with them. They started getting good. They liked me. I was actually allowed to do my own thing with them and coach them a bit more. And they loved me. And I was like, this is actually great. I actually really like coaching these lads, because they're taking on board more of what I'm saying, and they're actually improving a lot more than our senior team, which is very rewarding to see. I've never had ill intentions. I've done all my background checks. My conscience is clear. I'm simply asking a question, and you chose to go a completely different route with it. So, losing my voice, got to get ready for football. I've got a good group of people who support me on this channel. So, nice try, but what you said was sick, and I feel like you need to be called out for it. It's not fair to say something like that and get away with it. You could have just said nothing. Simple as. But yeah, really upset me, guys. I'm gonna leave it at that. Have nothing more to say in the matter. Happy Monday.